On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A, we discuss dissociative amnesia and domestic violence with Cindie Henrie. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse Q&A, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Cindie Henrie. How are you?
I am great. How are you, Brandon?
I am doing well, and for those that don't know you, you're the founder and director of LA Therapy Network. You are an LMFT, a trauma expert from sexual assault survivors to victims of violent crimes. You can be reached at latherapynetwork.com. That will be in our show notes. And today we're going to be discussing depersonalization, derealization disorder, dissociative amnesia. So big thank you for being here with us today. And first, let's just start off with depersonalization, derealization disorder. What is it and what are causes of it?
Okay. Hi. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I was very excited to join you today. Just wanted to let you know. So derealization and depersonalization, that is actually, to me, what I look at is that's more of a symptom of trauma. Usually it can come from a variety of sources. It can come from even just emotional and neglect in general. Like if a kid doesn't have a lot of reflection or mirroring from a caregiver, then they can develop those symptoms. Derealization is a sense of everything around you feeling like you're in a movie. Nothing feels real. So if you think about, like, let's say that, you are excited as a kid and you're like, look at the drawing I made, look. And that your caregiver is like, beep, leave a message or totally disinterested. You're not getting the reflection of excitement or your emotions reflected. And so then your experiences then become feeling surreal. So that's just an example of what can cause that surreal feeling. Other things can cause that as well. If something is like too difficult to manage or too difficult to handle, you can develop that as well. So different kinds of trauma may result in that. Depersonalization is specifically to your sense of your body. So a lot of times when you are traumatized by something, there's like an emotional cutoff from your body. So you go into a very intellectualized space. You can talk about things from the point of view of, oh, this thing happened, blah, 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 blah. But you're not really noticing it or experiencing it in your body. You're not necessarily feeling the experience of emotions attached to it. There's a disconnect, a cutoff. If you were to talk to shamans, they'll say it's almost like you're writing on the side of your self rather than in yourself, right? And the more kind of trauma that there is to your body, the more depersonalization that you may experience. So, for example, sexual trauma, sexual abuse, a lot of people will say they don't feel their body, they don't feel connected to their body. There's certain areas of their body they don't feel connected to. So that's depersonalization.
So when it comes to our show and a lot of the survivor stories that we have, what you just discussed, a lot of the time when it comes to sexual coercion, sexual assault, this is occurring, but it also happens in situations where there's physical abuse that is happening, but it can also happen with emotional abuse as well and verbal abuse as well when it becomes too much. So someone here is protecting themselves by going to this place and to have depersonalization happen. So within that and that protection, how does that unpacking that and going through this disorder, helping people with disorder, how does that affect them in the aftermath and the unpacking of all of those things when it comes to dealing with therapy and trauma with you?
So one thing that is interesting is a lot of therapists, I think more people are getting the information, but a lot of therapists have really neglected these two areas. They focused more on active PTSD with like the anxiety symptoms of panic and nightmares and, things like that. And what people are starting to understand more is that any kind of form of PTSD has both the active anxiety symptoms and the the hypo-aroused symptoms. So that's also dissociative, right? And so you have both. And so it's really important when you're working with somebody's trauma that you're aware of both areas and you're working with both. What we like to refer to it as like keeping somebody in their window of tolerance. How much anxiety are you able to tolerate before you start to have the symptoms that show that you're not able to handle it, right? So if you're getting really highly anxious and you're starting to panic or having an anxiety attack, or if you're starting to, leave session and you're really activated, or you're the opposite and really kind of spacing out or staring off and not really present, those are signs that you're outside of what you can handle. So as a trauma therapist, what I'm looking at is I'm monitoring the person, I'm monitoring their body, I'm monitoring the responses. How are they responding to content that they're talking about? I'm specifically trained in sensory motor psychotherapy, so I'm watching someone's body a lot. I'm watching the micro movements of their body and kind of seeing if there's a change that's happening. So a lot of times I'll actually interrupt their story and address what's happening in their body. So trauma is a physical thing. It's a body thing. And so a lot of people are trying to address that like cognitive behavioral, where it keeps it in your head and you're still staying in the intellectual area, but you actually have to drop into your body to address trauma. And so I try to do a lot of work with somebody within their body to get them. So in the case of derealization, depersonalization, it's working with them to become more aware of their experience, to teach their body a sense of safety, so that they can actually be more present in their own experience, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So for people who are listening, who don't know if this is what they're dealing with, what are the symptoms of not dealing with this type of disorder that goes on within their life if someone isn't able to kind of pinpoint what's kind of happening with me right now?
So I think there's a lot of different kinds of things that come up with people with derealization, depersonalization. One is, I think that particular one is in the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the back end of your main nervous system along your spine. And also in your facial muscles. So there's like a lack of movement in your face. So you have less emotional expression. You may have less, like other people are feeling something, they're more like emotional about something, and you're a little bit more detached from it. Or it seems like you're watching a movie and you're just responding, mimicking kind of what they're doing, but you may not really feel it or be as in tune to it. I think another is just that sensation of being detached from your experiences. Things feeling like it's surreal, like it's a movie. Being clumsy is a common experience, like finding bruises that you don't know how you got because you bang into things. Avoidant behavior is another, because things are too overwhelming. And so you quickly just don't want to, you avoid all conflict. You avoid anything that might raise or activate your nervous system because you're already consistently too activated. One of the problems that happens with that is when you are suppressing your feelings like that, things come out sideways. So you may also have like angry outbursts or panic attacks or anxiety attacks, or you may just be numb. But along with the numbness, you may act out things that have happened. So you may have angry acting out, but you don't even feel the anger, but that's coming out sideways. And so that's also a problem that comes up with this. And one of the reasons it's actually important to treat it is that, you're not reenacting things from your abuse experience.
And you bring up reenactment, I could go on for a long time.
I'm sure. And that doesn't have to be something extreme. That could just be acting out like, verbally, or, there's different ways you can act out, or just withholding, not letting people in, or just kind of staying distant, just staying on the sidelines.
And, we hear things like EMDR, and some people are going to the more experimental therapies now, like a ketamine therapy or the psilocybin type of therapy when they're dealing with these types of traumas.
I actually do all of those.
You do all of those
except for the psilocybin, because it's not legal yet.
So do you incorporate the body when it comes to those therapies?
Yes, absolutely. Whenever you deal with trauma, you have to deal with the body. If you're not dealing with the body, you're not actually getting to the root of what's going on, and you're not able to unearth it. So dealing with the body is incredibly important. But you definitely can do that with EMDR. I use EMDR and sensory motor in conjunction with each other all the time. I think that's a pretty standard approach for me. For ketamine use, I wouldn't necessarily use that for derealization, depersonalization specifically, because ketamine is a dissociative drug. Although there are cases where I would use it, it just depends on the situation, how much a person has responded to treatment and where they're at in their treatment. The dissociative might then actually be effective. So it just, it's really a case by case situation, which is one of the reasons that I am a private therapist, because that way I really have the freedom to be able to implement what might be the most effective in any case.
So we've now discussed depersonalization, derealization disorder. Recently, and I say recently, it might not have been that recent, because when I initially got a hold of you a while ago, to me it was recent then. We had someone that came onto the show that discussed dissociative amnesia of what they were going through. So can you discuss about dissociative amnesia, what it is, and the trauma and where that comes from?
Sure, absolutely. So, when you are in a situation that feels life-threatening or threatening to your sense of self or your personhood, the blood flow of your brain changes. It goes to the areas of your body that are vital organs. So the recording of your memory is not going to be the same in a traumatic event than like, let's say, just us talking. So right now we're going to have more of a story memory. We're going to have more of like, okay, these are the things that happen, and here's all the details, or the main details, the key details. In a traumatic situation, the blood flow is either going to go to like, here's an image of this that represents this whole thing, and you have that one snapshot image, or it's not necessary to record it, or it's too overwhelming to the body or to the person to record that information. So it's going to go, the blood flow goes in a different direction. And your body kind of just makes that decision, what's going to happen. It also has to do with the chemicals that are released during trauma. Obviously, it's a complex system that happens, but that's actually what causes it, is that shift or change.
So that memory's gone forever?
No, not necessarily. It can be recorded, but it's like stored somewhere else. It's just like not easily accessible unless something actually triggers it. So that's when people are talking about repressed memories, and all of a sudden like something triggered it. So there may be like something that you visually see in TV, or a smell, because all of your sensory organs pass through the center area of your brain, which is your limbic system, and the system that deals with like traumatic stuff and emotion and that kind of thing. And it all goes to the relay center in the back of your brain, which then gives information out and just says, here's how to react, here's how to respond in your whole body, right? And so sensory information is actually often a trigger to the emotions and or a visual memory, a smell memory, and some sort of sensory memory. So that's why people talk about body memories. It's like they're feeling like somebody, for example, in sexual trauma with childhood abuse, they may feel like hands on them, and they're having an actual body memory that was triggered, but they may not have the actual visual memory that goes along with that.
So when we hear about repressed memories, most of the time we're probably dealing with a dissociative amnesia situation, and a repressed memory has come back to the forefront of your life based upon a trigger that you couldn't put your finger on, but it was there, and then boom, it pops back up in layman's terms.
Yeah, I think that's a really good description. I mean, sometimes you know the trigger, sometimes you don't. Sometimes something triggers it, and it's almost like this cascade effect where all these memories that were just repressed all kind of pop out, in this like cascade, which is, I think, really overwhelming and really difficult.
So this sounds extremely overwhelming, especially if you didn't know it was coming, and you then have to deal with a lot of this stuff that's being hidden from you, and now it's right in your face. So how do you help people deal with all of that overwhelm And it sounds like when a dissociative amnesia comes to the forefront and the memories come back, that it could be so overwhelming to the point where you might not be functional in other parts of your life because it is too overwhelming. So how do you help people move through that, and what do you say to them? Because it will be very difficult to go from being functional to unfunctional. And for a lot of people, that means maybe I can't take care of my children. I can't maybe work. I can't do a lot of things I was able to do before. So it's not just one issue here we're now dealing with. We're talking about I'm not fitting into the system that's going on, and I don't know when I will be able to.
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, most of the time when a repressed memory comes up, you're not going to become unfunctional.
Okay.
Some people do experience that. So there's a whole range. And so I don't want to negate people that memories pop up and then, they're still able to handle their life and deal with things. But, there's a huge range that may happen there. If somebody gets to the point that they're really non-functional, it's possible they may need temporary hospitalization, get on medication, get kind of stabilize their nervous system, because your nervous system all of a sudden is completely overwhelmed and can't handle stuff. So you need the medications to actually get you to handle things as quickly as possible. When I'm working with trauma, I want to keep people as functional as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is teach them skills in their body to help manage the overwhelm and what's happening. And pacing is really important. So a lot of times when somebody has PTSD and all this stuff comes up, they want to kind of rush through and try to get through it as fast as possible and get back to normal life as fast as possible. And what I explain to them is, if you do that, you actually increase the trauma symptoms. You make it worse. So it's really important to learn how to put the brakes on. And it's kind of, it's like if you're going through a school zone, you don't want to go 100 miles an hour. You want to stop at every stop sign and you want to go 20 miles an hour. You got to take it slow and you want to try to ground in your current life. So I try to keep people as functional as humanly possible. What can you do? I focus on the what can you do. And here's different exercises that you can do that support that or help that. And then, of course, there's also psychiatric medications. There may be acupuncture. There may be, even it could be ketamine sessions, right? Who knows? Each individual person will respond to different things. So it's kind of a broad, answer to, I think, your question.
What are some of the things that you can do?
So one thing is that there's an exercise that's called orienting. So if you look around a room and you find 5 different things and 5 different smells, 5 different, sounds, you kind of go through all your senses. You really orient to present and try to focus on the here and now and not obsess on the memory. That can be challenging because it's like this new thing and you're got to get to the bottom of it and what's happening. But information will come if you're ready for it, and it just kind of takes time. So it's just letting your subconscious do its thing. It's not uncommon with brain development that people in their 30s may actually experience that. It seems to be that your brain is organized enough by that point that old things from childhood that you couldn't handle then start to come up. So I hear that a lot in people in their 30s, and all of a sudden all this information came out. Or there's a news case that was about sexual assault, and now they're realizing, oh, I had that same thing, this experience, and then they start to ruminate on it. So I want to disrupt that rumination. So the 5 felt senses is actually important. When you feel safe, you tend to take your environment in, you look around, and you see all the different things all around you. So you're moving your head. And so that's one of the things that I teach people to do, is to really take in their environment, look to the right, look up, look down, look to the left, look behind you, look at something specific so that you're really noticing and you're teaching your brain it's safe. So that's one thing. People, when they're really anxious, you can do planks. Planks are really good to put you right in your body, or doing wall sits, so it's things that really put you in your core. Sometimes people need weighted blankets, deep breathing. There's yoga for trauma that can be incredibly helpful.
So those were the do's. Before, you mentioned a don't do when it came to trauma. So what are other things when it comes to healing trauma are on your list of things to not do?
One is the obsessive rumination. That's not really helpful. What it does is it increases trauma symptoms. So if you're just chewing, yes, it's important to think about it, to journal about it, to explore it, but also be present in your current life. Do things that put you in your body. Do things that are soothing to you. So if, maybe that's taking a bath. That might be something that is soothing. Maybe there's certain types of music that are really good for your nervous system. There's certain types of binaural beats that can bring you in down. Meditations, things like that. Anything that brings you into a calmer state and tries to orient you to a calmer space is really actually the most helpful, because you don't want the trauma to become the main theme. But I have had people where their trauma is just so activated that you just have to work through it. And I find that the combination of EMDR and sensory motor have been really helpful for that.
And I guess when it comes to trauma as a whole, when it comes to domestic violence type relationships, what is the hardest thing you have seen for people to overcome? And is it the betrayal aspect of things? Is it the actual physical harm of things, their own safety and the fear of everything? And how have you gone in your practice specifically with that group of people, that the ones that are listening to our show mostly are dealing with?
Okay. Well, I think there's a few things that are really key in domestic violence. One is your attachment to your perpetrator. Any kind of situation where somebody is physically harmful to you or even emotionally harmful to you or overwhelms your psyche and then is loving and draws you in is going to create what is a pathological attachment. It's a very difficult attachment to break. So a lot of people get really upset with themselves, like, why can't I just leave? Why is it that I'm just making all these excuses for them? I intellectually know that this is not good or not true, but emotionally I can't let go. I think that's actually the hardest over everything. I mean, it could, there could be instances where the physical is the most difficult or the rape is the most difficult. I mean, it really depends on the person. That can be more individual, but typically the most difficult aspect of it is the attachment to your perpetrator. They experience an attachment that it's you make excuses for them. You want to see them as good. You want to see them as, loving. You want to see them as somebody who's on your side or cares about you. You're looking for reasons for them to be okay or good. And that there was a case that was called Stockholm Syndrome. And what you're really dealing with in domestic violence is Stockholm Syndrome. It's an attachment to your perpetrator. So there was I don't know if you've talked about Stockholm Syndrome on your show.
Well, we've never done an episode on Stockholm Syndrome. We've done episodes on love addiction. We've done episodes kind of around the realm of what you're talking about as creating an addiction to another person. And for a very long time, I was using that as an analogy where the person that you are in a relationship with is the drugs and the drug dealer. So they are able to dispense and take away themselves when needed, creating that intermittent reinforcement and the breadcrumbs to ping pong you back and forth for as long as they have you. Because once they have you, because you're now addicted to them, and that it's the same thing. And some people decide to try to wean themselves off, but in these cases, as soon as they get back in to your life, all they need to do is, for you as an addict, and if you're a drug addict,
it is like addiction.
You have to make the phone call to get those drugs. You have to go out and get those drugs. But you can stay at home, and those drugs aren't coming to you. In this case, with a human being, this person might be calling you. They might be showing up at your door. They might be showing up at work. They might be getting a friend to do that, or a family member to reach out. So it becomes a little bit more difficult, which is why 1 in 7. Sorry, it takes 7 times in average to leave your abuser.
Correct.
So
Right.
we use the addiction kind of idea around here because in a lot of ways it's just
Easier to relate to.
easier to relate to.
I think the only problem that I would say with that is that I think a lot of people see addiction as like, oh, this is your disease or disorder, and like there's something wrong with you, that is the case. And it actually is a normal physiological response that is protective, because the more you're attached to your perpetrator, the more you try to understand them, the more you try to control and manage how violent they may get or how difficult the situation can be. And so it is something that is a natural trauma response. And I don't like to pathologize that, because that is something that is just a normal response. It's just a very difficult thing to break. Yeah. But I do think that, what you're describing is really the experience of it. It's really tough. And that attachment is much more difficult to break. In fact, the scary thing is that pimps know how to do that. And pimps will create that, and anybody can create that within less than 72 hours. They can actually create it in one interaction. It's pretty scary. That's pretty scary. If you know what you're doing, you can really, you can take control of somebody pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we have people on the show who, they're dealing with someone who doesn't fully understand what they're doing. They just know what kind of works, just like how a child might know if I cry right now, I'll be able to get this. Sometimes it can
Exactly.
be conscious, but then you get some people who know what they're doing and they can really do. There's different levels of damage, but so I always like to say, what's scarier, the person that knows what they're doing, or the person who has no control over what they're doing?
Yeah.
And that's its own set of,
yeah,
it's the same fears, just, I don't know. I won't go into that one, but anyway, before we leave today, I guess what's going on with you, your practice, and everything else that's going on with your life and being a trauma expert for sexual assault survivors to victims of violent crimes?
That is such a broad question. Like, what is going on with my practice? I think with my practice, we're doing pretty good. There's 5 of us total, 5 different therapists total here. Everybody specializes in trauma and has different training and different things they offer. Like I do have somebody who does like a mindfulness therapy, who's done like mindfulness, and I think they're actually looking into Reiki as a part of what they do. I do have somebody who's, focused more on children versus older people. And then we have somebody with couples that specifically does Gottman therapy, which is amazing because it's a very, evidence-based approach in terms of helping couples. Somebody else who also does body, and we do have several people who do EMDR. So, I'm the only one who does the ketamine treatments, and I also am one that specializes in the LGBTQIA ... community. So I'll just kind of quantify that as queer community, or just specifically to women's issues. But I've tried to create a practice that, is representative as much as possible in terms of what we can offer, so that there's more options for the clientele that come and see us. We also run a lot of different kinds of therapy groups. We do have several trauma groups, sexual trauma groups. I have a DID group that is specific to organized abuse. So people who are raised in more organized, nefarious groups. And then I have a complex trauma group, and we have a transgendered women's group. So, so we're doing a lot of different stuff. I know one of my therapists here really wants to do like a parenting group. So we're hoping to start something like that as well.
Well, thank you for being here. Hopefully you'll come back. I'd love to do an episode with you on all the different attachment styles.
That would be fun.
Yeah, well, I think we would have fun doing that one. So you can be reached at latherapynetwork.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Cindie Henrie, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing all of your knowledge with everyone here.
Brandon, thank you so much. I really enjoyed meeting you.
Well, thank you, Cindie, for being here once again. And if you want to be a guest on our Survivor Story episodes, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button at the top of the page, and there you can read all of our instructions. And please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out our guest form and press the submit button. And please do send it in the format that we ask for. Also, at our website, we have a support group. So if you need support, we have a support group by clicking on the support group button at narcissistapocalypse.com. Inside, you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night and Thursday afternoons. We have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. It is a wonderful group of people on there. You can make a lot of friends too. So if you need support, join our support group today. And if you need even more support, please do visit our friends at DomesticShelters.org. At DomesticShelters.org, they have articles and resources to help you make sense of everything that you're dealing with. And they have every phone number, email address, web address for shelters and agencies, no matter how big or small the town you are in. DomesticShelters.org has it there. So if you need extra support, please do go to DomesticShelters.org. And we have other friends of the show called Shelter Movers. So Shelter Movers can be found at sheltermovers.com. And what they do is they help you move all of your stuff out of your home and into storage. And that can be for your pets and livestock too. So if you're trying to get out of domestic violence and coercive control and you need help leaving the home, getting all of your stuff out of your home, sheltermovers.com can help you get all of your stuff out of your home and into storage. That includes your pets and livestock too. They are only available in Canada and they are a donor-supported charitable organization. So if you need help from them or want to donate to them, go to sheltermovers.com. And that is it for today's episode. So for myself and Cindie Henrie, we hope you have a good night.